Thanks for everybody for coming. Buenas tardes, welcome, bienvenidos, bienvenidas, bienvenue. My name is Laura MacDonald. I'm a professor of political science at Carleton University and also interim president of the Canadian Association of Latin American and Caribbean Studies. I would like to begin by acknowledging the fact that I'm located in Ottawa on the traditional and unceded territory of the Algonquin Nation. I would like to encourage you, wherever you're located in our Americas and elsewhere, to consider the history of dispossession, violence, and colonial encroachment that shape the territories where most of us are located and that continue to shape and influence our relationships and ways of thinking and knowing. So it's a great pleasure to host this webinar, which is replacing a much anticipated event at our annual Congress in August, which unfortunately had to be canceled. We're therefore happy to be able to welcome Dr. Carlos Heredia from CIDE in Mexico City today, who will give what would have been the keynote address at that Congress. So Carlos will speak for about 35-40 minutes, followed by a time for question and answers. And since we're in a webinar format, you'll have to enter your questions by writing into the Q&A section of the Zoom window. And I will attempt to moderate and read the questions out to Carlos as appropriate. He will be speaking in English, but I believe can answer questions in Spanish or French as well. After the Q&A, we'll have a short celebration of our wonderful prize winners from last year, and then some final announcements and thank yous. And we have Dr. Agustin Goonega from Lund University in Sweden, who'll talk about the awards, and Lucy Lucisano, both of them are from our board, who will talk about membership in CALACS, and also do some other announcements. So again, it's my great pleasure to introduce Carlos. He is an associate professor in the Department of International Studies at the Center for Research and Teaching on Economics, CIDE in Mexico City. And he's taught at CIDE since 2009. His research focuses on Mexican and Central American migration to the United States, on the bilateral US-Mexico relationship, and on the newer Mexico-US-Canada agreement, TEMEC in Spanish, CUSMA in English, and USMCA in the United States. Sorry, English in Canada, it's CUSMA. He's worked for 3 decades with Mexican migrant workers, both in their communities of origin and in their cities of destination. He served as a member of Mexico's Congress from 1997 to 2000. He's a member of the advisory board of the Mexico Institute at the Woodrow Wilson Center in Washington, where he was appointed a non-resident global fellow in 2020. He publishes a fortnightly op-ed in El Universal. He has very recently published a new book with Routledge titled Geopolitical Landscapes of Donald Trump, International Politics and Institutional Characteristics of Mexico-Guatemala Relations, which looks fantastic. He studied, he did his undergraduate work at ITAM, Instituto Tecnológico Autónomo de México. He did his MA in economics at McGill, so he's a good friend of Canada, and earned his PhD at UNAM in Mexico. He has a long and distinguished career working with development NGOs, and when I first met him in the 1990s, he was head of one of Mexico's most important civil society organizations, Equipo Pueblo. He is a true model of a combined scholar, activist, and public intellectual. So thank you very much, Carlos, and over to you.
Thanks, Laura, and thanks everyone for this opportunity of exchanging ideas. I also want to thank, well, CALACS in general, and Don Kingsbury, and also my CIDE colleague, Catherine Vezina, for the contact that she made in the first place for this invitation. As Laura mentioned, I attended McGill a long time ago, and I also attended Université Laval, and I've been in close contact with my friends and colleagues in Canada ever since. So it's always a great pleasure to have the opportunity to engage in a dialogue and bring up to date our views, reciprocal views on what is going in the region and what is going on in Canada. Your Prime Minister was just here, and I had the opportunity to engage in a fruitful dialogue with some members of the Canadian delegation, a couple of ministers and a member of parliament. So this is it sounds cliche to say that it is a crucial moment, but it is, because 2 years from now, we may have a change of presidents and prime minister. Who knows? So 2024 will be a crucial year for North America. And while I say that, it will also be a crucial year for Latin America, as we will have more time to evaluate the new progressive cycle that we are witnessing now. I have been asked to discuss the fallout of COVID-19 and what a recovery strategy would look like from Latin America. I will begin by putting out an overview of the situation in Latin America and discuss some countries in particular, specifically, and then how each country dealt or did not deal with COVID and the current situation. Let me start by saying, and I don't mean to engage in a controversy right now about whether Latin America is a monolithic continent and a homogeneous continent, and whether you can speak of a single unified voice coming out from the subcontinent, from the hemisphere. I do not pledge allegiance to that view. I see a lot of diversity, and even within the so-called progressive governments, there's so much diversity and variety and even contradictions that I will highlight. So I have to be very careful in discussing the situation of specific countries, because the temptation is there to group them all together, to bundle them up and ask for a unified, homogeneous view that does not exist. Just as some people would discuss the nature and identity of North America. So we in Latin America love to talk about Latin American integration, but that's at the same time, at least from my perspective, a desired goal and an unreachable objective. We want it, but there are so many obstacles to be able to talk about a strategy towards Latin American integration. It is quite evident that the two largest countries, Mexico and, well, Brazil, the two largest economies, Brazil and Mexico, have very different views, geopolitical views of the subcontinent, even if they are both presided by progressive leaders, Luis Ignacio Lula da Silva and Andrés Manuel López Obrador. I dare to say that they differ in more things, in more issues than they are prepared to accept. And Itamaraty and our foreign ministry on Avenida Juárez in Mexico City are not precisely close buddies. In fact, they are quite distant. some of the very issues in which progressive governments are supposed to share a common platform. So those of you who want to begin an analysis or an essay, taking as a point of departure that there is homogeneity and uniformity between Lula and AMLO, I suggest you look elsewhere. And I think there are two questions that we have to answer, that we have to ask ourselves to even begin to discuss COVID and the aim at recovery. The first one is the nature of the state, which is an eternal question in political science and in economics. What kind of state are we looking at, and what kind of state do we aim to arrive at? More so than using the categories of left or right, of neoliberal and progressive. Because, for instance, President López Obrador will often use neoliberal policies that he thinks he's fighting, but he's actually adopting. And López Obrador ended up a fervent partisan of NAFTA, and then of the TEMEC, like we call it here in Mexico. So that's the first question. What kind of a state are we looking at? How is the state, how is the nation building process taking place? How is the state built? What is the role of citizens? What kind of transformation is each government embarking upon? Where do they want to go? Or are they moving towards one-man rule? Because you will find that in categories that I think are wrong, people call the regimes of Nicolás Maduro, of Miguel Díaz-Canel, and of Daniel Ortega as being leftists, and they're not leftists, they're dictators. That's my view. So that very different approaches to nation building, to the construction of the state, to the role of citizens throughout our subcontinent. And the second question that has increasingly become relevant is what is the nature of the de facto powers, the role of the de facto powers, the powers that be, whether they are legal, like the monopolists in the economy that dictate the rules of the economy, or they are outside the law, like drug traffickers and criminal organizations that control increasing portions, increasing segments of the territory in each country. So if we're going to talk about COVID, then we have to address those two questions, and probably a footnote that cuts across both questions, which is the role of the military, which in Latin America has become increasingly relevant and ever-present, omnipresent, at least in the case of Mexico, which I will discuss later on. So democracy is in turmoil, but that's not only the case in Latin America. Let's say that from the Great Lakes to Tierra del Fuego, we have seen the January 6, 2021 assault on the US Congress, and then the proceedings of the members of Congress after that, find that then President Donald Trump not only was informed, but he was the mastermind in this move to undermine US democracy. And then exactly 2 years later, the copycat assault on the three branches of power in Brazil. So we must ask ourselves, what is at the root of political and economic polarization in each case? So I served in the Mexican Congress long ago. I was a member of Congress, and I always asked myself the question, why, what am I here for? What am I doing here? What am I doing in the Congress? What are other fellow members doing? And I don't want to disappoint you, but the most recurrent issue was, well, I want to re-elect and reproduce myself. That was the answer that I got more often. That's what I'm here for, to be honest, to be candid. I could not re-elect myself back then. I served in the 1980s, no, in the 1990s, and then re-election came later. But it would be very naive to assume that most politicians are looking for the good of the country. So when it comes to policy making and comes to COVID, we will see how this has an impact on policy making. I also have to say that Latin America has become increasingly irrelevant in the international stage. Latin America's share of the world's economy and trade is shrinking. Its share of, and it is also lagging behind in terms of climate action, in technological innovation. And in fact, there's a disconnect in this regard in the case of Mexico with the rest of Latin America. If I look at Mexico's trade partner and economic scenario, I will find that in our foreign trade, North America takes 85%, Latin America takes 4%. So the figures are there, the statistics are there, and they're very telling in terms of the priorities that our government has. To give you an example, President López Obrador has been in office for 4 years now. He took the oath of office on December 1st, 2018. And his term will be up on 30 September 2024. So he's been in office for 4 years, and he has yet to visit any country in South America. You know, people may say, well, you know, Biden is only coming to Canada in March, I think. It's the next door neighbor and he hasn't visited. Well, and a US president had not visited Mexico since 2014, you know, right before, well, that's the time span that it took an American president to come back to Mexico. Biden was just here for the North American summit. And in the case of Chile, which is probably the one country that exemplifies diversity and diversification throughout the globe, its trade with the rest of Latin America is only 1/4 of total trade. So Latin America is Chile's 4th largest trading partner after China, the United States, and Europe, in that sequence. So the one word that I see more often associated to the term Latin America, it comes from literature, and it's solitude. It's the title of a new book by former president of Chile, Ricardo Lagos, and Jorge Castañeda and Héctor Aguilar Camín, distinguished public intellectuals in Mexico, who discuss Latin America's solitude. And I have to mention this because to a good extent, you can breathe that atmosphere when you go through different countries in Latin America. In fact, in 2014, when Gabriel Garcia Marquez passed, and some of you may know that he lived more than half of his life in Mexico. When he passed, there was a tribute to him in Mexico's Fine Arts Palace, Palacio de Bellas Artes. Then President of Colombia, Juan Manuel Santos, came over to Mexico City and delivered his remarks at the Fine Arts Palace. And then I quote from his remarks: "I come to Mexico in the name of 47 million Colombians with a heavy heart and a thankful soul to bid farewell to the greatest Colombian of all times, Gabriel Garcia Marquez. We gather here to commemorate his lifetime work and his very pertinent remarks when in Stockholm in 1982, he spoke about Latin America's solitude. He told us, however, that it was never too late to believe in utopia, to live in a society in which love was true and happiness could be possible." An end of quotation marks. And then he used one very known phrase of Cien Años de Soledad to close his remarks, in the hope that Latin American countries would succeed in generating their second chance on earth. Their first chance was their independence, our independence. Most countries from Spain, others from France, others from Britain. So that was the first opportunity on earth when we became independent and separated from our colonial masters, from Haiti in 1803 to Belize in 1981. Although our First Nations, our Pueblo Autochtone, would very much subscribe to what Laura McDonald read at the beginning of this webinar. So in the last few years, what countries are better off, which are middle class and which are in poverty? There are neighborhoods in Mexico City, Monterrey, Sao Paulo, Buenos Aires, Santiago, where the family income is similar to prosperous neighborhoods in Dallas or in Toronto. However, when we look at the national situation, the panorama changes in an important way to show stark contrasts. In every ranking of Human Development Index, it is Chile, Argentina, Costa Rica, Uruguay, and Panama that have indexes similar to those of Eastern Europe, Romania, Russia, Turkey, Hungary, Slovakia. Then it's Venezuela, Belize, El Salvador, Nicaragua, Guatemala, and Honduras, who are in the same league as Ghana, India, Bangladesh, Morocco, and Iraq. Haiti pretty much belongs in Africa, alongside Nigeria, Rwanda, Benin, Uganda, and Lesotho. So in the same hemisphere, we have places that remind us of wealthy areas in Canada and the United States. And as we go down the rankings, we see places that look like, again, Eastern Europe, the Southern Caucasus, the Middle East and South Asia, and finally, Sub-Saharan Africa. Latin America is at the same time all of that. Costa Rica, Chile, and Uruguay are the only countries that have broken with extreme and chronic inequality. Their social and political cultures have a record of intolerance of extreme inequality. So they try to move towards greater equality of opportunities at the point of departure. They have managed to establish egalitarian cultures and align the elites again with the reduction of inequality. Those three countries have as a common denominator the greatest progress in the subcontinent in social rights that a modern democracy required. And those were not conquests of the left, of the radical left, but rather of the social democratic governments. So even in cities that are as prosperous as Santiago de Chile, usually rank as one of the top cities to do business, we find a highly unequal and fragmented population. What we didn't know at the beginning of the 21st century was that things could get worse before they could get any better. Enter the once in a century pandemic. The COVID-19 pandemic has been labeled the worst in a century after the 19 influenza epidemic. In any crisis, leaders have two equally important responsibilities: solve the immediate problem and keep it from happening again. The COVID-19 was the case in point. We needed to save lives, but at the same time, we needed to improve the response to outbreaks. The first point was more pressing, but the second point has longer-term social consequences. So how did we deal with the pandemic in Latin America? In general, national public health systems in most countries were ill-prepared to deal with it. What made things even more complicated was that at the same time, we had three presidents, and I'm including one from North America, Donald Trump in the United States, but also Jair Bolsonaro in Brazil, and Andrés Manuel López Obrador in Mexico, who either did not believe in scientific approaches or preached very creative solutions which had more to do with magic or superstition or religious beliefs than with science and medicine. Most importantly, and most seriously, the number of excess deaths throughout Latin America was unexpectedly high, while the loss of jobs and the destruction of small businesses became unprecedented. The World Bank has stated that after several years of slow growth, the economy in Latin America and the Caribbean has faced a new setback, precisely because of the pandemic. The pandemic made evident the weaknesses and the fragile situation of health systems throughout Latin American countries. I bring to you the examples, the cases of people dying on the streets of Guayaquil in Ecuador, survivors in Guatemala City, bidding the last farewell to their loved ones on the street because they didn't want to go into the cemetery for fear of contagion. And victims in Manaus in Brazil who died not because of COVID, but for lack of oxygen. Let me move up a bit faster. So that speaks of a very fragile social mobility or upward social mobility that is almost non-existent. And that lack of opportunities defines societies that are deeply fragmented. A kid in a rich neighborhood, in whichever country you want to single out, never mingles with kids from poor areas because they attend totally different schools, they go to different hospitals, they have entertainment that is completely different. And that is at the root of what is broken in Latin America. We do not know our fellow citizens who live in the opposite side of town. We do not know their problems. We don't talk to them. They don't know us. And we have a completely segmented, separated life. We were born in different families, attended different universities, married into totally different families. And this segmentation is at the root of the the violent explosions that we have seen, and that I'm not justifying at all. I'm just trying to describe how the social unrest has bred over time in Latin America, despite the fact that we have had several warnings to tell us this was going to happen. We were not prepared for COVID, but our social tissue became even more fragmented. The wealthy exerted political pressure on governments to reduce taxes because supposedly that was going to create investments and create jobs. Needless to say, the savings from reduced taxes did not go into investments, did not go to better hospitals, but rather to financial speculation and to tax shelters abroad. And it is children, and especially girls, and I want to take a minute to focus on children throughout Latin America that suffer the most. The phrase innocent kids and voracious oligarchs is precisely the one that describes more accurately this divide in our societies. In fact, it is a mistake. I've been, immersed into what is going on in Central America, and I often hear, Central American countries are poor countries. That is not exactly the case. In fact, there are hordes of millionaires and billionaires in Central America that profit from extractive economies, from predatory policies, from the protection of the military and private armies, because they do not want to move an inch from the entrenched positions of privilege that they have enjoyed, I should say, for centuries. So Central American countries are not poor, but they are countries that are populated mostly by poor people, because that segmentation, divide has been there since the Spanish conquest, and it is taken and seen as the natural state of things. So let me now say that there is the outcome of this situation in Latin America, the solitude of Latin America, also means that we do not have a forum in which we can legitimately discuss these issues, but we have created so many organizations. There's a soup of acronyms that people lose count of how many they are now, but not the Economic Community of Latin America, which will meet in Buenos Aires on Tuesday and Wednesday, not the UNASUR, represent the whole of the countries. And this multiplication of organizations has been criticized by President Gabriel Boric, who says correctly that Latin America should stop creating regional organizations as a function of ideological and political affinity. And there's one example to that in what happened with the designation of a new president at the Inter-American Development Bank. As you may recall, the Trump administration appointed a US citizen, Mauricio Claver Caron, as the president of the Inter-American Development Bank, breaking with a long history of number one at the IDB being from Latin America and number two from the United States. So there was a lot of uproar and protest of several Latin American governments. Then 2 years down the road, Claver Caron was removed by the governors of the IDB after an ethics investigation. And what did the Latin American governments do? Did they come up with a unified candidacy? No. We had five candidates, not two, not three, not four, but five. So Argentina, Brazil, Chile, Mexico, and Trinidad Tobago came up with different candidates, and you know, you once again wonder, where is this wish for integration and unity? There, you know, there's the CELAC meeting again in 4 days, and López Obrador has already announced that he will not attend. His friend Alberto Fernández did not ally with him for the IDB, and Alberto Fernández says López Obrador did not support the Argentinian candidate. So the dreams of an alleged Mexico City, Buenos Aires axis have long disappeared. Okay, now let me move to the recovery strategy. First of all, if democracy is in worse shape than it has been at any time since the late 1990s, it is very difficult to talk about a concerted strategy for recovery. Most countries are undergoing what analysts have called democratic stagnation with enormous deficits in democratic quality. Some elected governments are outright blocking democratic institutions, or even trying to eliminate them. I don't need to go at length in discussing what is going on in El Salvador. And of course, President Nayib Bukele would say that we know nothing because he has the support of 80% of Salvadorians. In Mexico, the current administration is trying to destroy the Instituto Nacional Electoral, the National Election Board, even though it was exactly the same composition of the institute when López Obrador won the election by a landslide. But I want to focus specifically in 6 countries that have experienced democratic breakdowns or erosion. And I cannot find one single example of a country in which democracy has been deepening or has taken more solid roots. Venezuela and Nicaragua now have full-blown, highly repressive authoritarian regimes joining the ranks of Cuba. Democracy has eroded in Brazil and Mexico. At least, when I started writing this, Lula had not taken office, but let's see how this goes. And the January 8th assault on the 3 branches of power is of course a very worrisome development. The Cuban regime, cracked down on dissidents, and is in 2021, and now celebrates that it has neutralized poor and dissident young people through imprisonment and exodus. So that is the harsh reality faced in Latin America, and every to an increasing extent, politicians are turning to see the military as a wishful solution, military solution that is just an illusion to political challenges. in Mexico at CIDE, we have compiled an inventory of all the functions of the government that have been turned over to the military, including building and running civilian airports, including managing ports, airports, railroads, including the distribution of medicines, and you name it. So it is a formally democratic regime which increasingly relies on the military to operate. One of the top analysts in Mexico has labeled that this administration, which only focuses on distributing cash, on dispensing cash through social programs, as an ATM with an army. Let me wrap up. It's going to be 3:45 soon. Just by saying that when we turn to the elites, in the case of Mexico, our elites have had two warnings already. One was in '94 when the Zapatista uprising told the nation and told the world that in Chiapas there were thousands of deaths of children because of diseases that could be easily prevented and cured, but the elites prefer not to heed this call. And the second was precisely the election of López Obrador. Because ever since 2018, what has happened is that the elites are not asking themselves if there is a new political regime in Mexico, what should I do? How should I change? What should I learn from this new political development? But are rather looking how to turn back the clock, and in the same kind of mistake that some of us made, saying if we get the PRI out of Los Pinos, of the presidential palace, then all the problems of the country will be solved. Now the elites are saying if López Obrador, when López Obrador is out, then the problems of the country will be solved. And they bet on bringing back the old status quo that will not do the country any good. Three words on the recovery in the new progressive cycle. I think that the progressive governments have a weakness, which is the fact that they're more prone to distribute already existing wealth than to generate new opportunities for the workers and for the large majority of the population. So I will just add that a fiscal policy, taxation with representation, continues to be the best redistributing mechanism, and is one issue in which we find a very important contrast between the administration of López Obrador, who has staunchly refused to start a fiscal reform, with the administrations, with the governments of Gustavo Petro in Colombia, Gabriel Boric in Chile, and Luis Ignacio Lula da Silva in Brazil. Okay, final words. This morning, I was reading the newspaper with my cup of coffee by the side, and I learned that the new Alfaguara Prize, which is very important in the Spanish language world, went to a Peruvian writer. I already quoted the great Gabriel Garcia Marquez, and I'm going to quote Gustavo Rodriguez, a young Peruvian writer that won the Alfaguara Prize, and he says, the crisis in Peru, and all the news media carried the news of these demonstrations in the old Lima, in the downtown area of Lima, is the consequence of the disdain of the powerful in Peru for their fellow Peruvians. That's where he locates the problem. He says that people are protesting because of the inequality and because they're seen as nobodies who deserve no attention. They're fed up of politicians and the powerful who only look at their own interests. He says, I'm no political analyst, but that's what I see in the streets of Lima. And of course, end of the quote, and I say to myself, Pedro Castillo orchestrated a coup. He wanted to get rid of the legislative, as bad as it was. He did not use a democratic mechanism. But then at the other end of the social tissue, the elites in Lima, again, like the elites in Mexico, prefer not to heed the warnings and bet on a future of solitude. They do not want to cohabitate with their fellow citizens, and that's basically the root of the very pressing economic and social challenges that we already had before COVID, and that became even deeper in the aftermath of the pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carlos. You know, normally we'd have deafening applause, but we can't do that on Zoom. But I really want to thank you for your wise and sobering words. I must say, I'm a little depressed, if not desperate, after listening to this incredible tour d'horizon of the situation in the Americas now. I'd like to, and you didn't even mention the climate crisis, which was the big crisis that we were all pulling our hair out about before COVID hit, and the two of them coming together, because of course the climate crisis continues, makes the situation even worse. So I'd like to ask people if they could write questions into the Q&A, and I will raise them for Carlos. But since I don't see any right now, please write in questions. I beg you. But in the interim, I'd like to ask you a couple of things. Well, first of all, I'd like to ask you, where do you find hope? Is there any hope? And where do you look for hope? And okay, that's my one question. I did see another question come up, so I'll ask you to talk about that, and then I'll go to the other questions. Oh, Carlos, we can't hear you. I can't hear you anyway.
So where do I find hope, and where do I look for hope? Okay. Let me share with you a very small experience, but that is significant. Back in 2018, under the Peña Nieto government and the Trump administration, Mexico, deepened the humanitarian crisis with Central American migrants. And in 2019, we started the Remain in Mexico program, basically refusing refuge to migrants or accepting migrants that were deported by the United States, mainly from Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. So in my academic work, I have many contacts and joint projects with the Jesuit universities in Central America, the Rafael Landívar University, the Universidad Centroamericana UCA in San Salvador, the UCA in Managua. And one of the professors was a Jesuit in the UCA, came to me and said, we have had so many academic exchanges. Do you think we could do an educational, international education program? And I said, what do you have in mind? Well, you know, the mothers in the parishes, in the communities that I visit, they tell me a lot, Padre, please take my son, please take my daughter, because when my son turns 15, the maras, the gangs, will try to recruit him as a hitman. And they will try to take my daughter to enlist her in human trafficking and prostitution. So please take my son, please take my daughter, and help them study in a safe environment. Mexico is not a safe environment, but it may be safer for them than, you know, the 300 meters they have to walk to the bus stop in San Pedro Sula. So we put together a project to, you know, to raise money for scholarships of youth, Central American youth. And in a pilot project, a dozen students came. We would have liked to have hundreds of students here, but we wanted to send a message that not all of Mexico was for kicking the Hondurans out. And it was very successful. And these youth had an excellent performance in their technical high school in Puebla, in the city of Puebla. And in fact, they you know, they elicited a few questions on how come they perform so well coming from a foreign country, even though it's the same language. There are many differences in the culture and even in the food. And well, they came from the school, a network of schools that the Jesuits have in Central America that is called Fe y Alegría. And those students became top students in their high school here in Mexico. And now some of them have stayed for university studies in Mexico. Some of them have gone to neighboring countries. Some of them have gone back home where the situation has not changed much. But I find hope in working with youth that need just a small opportunity to perform very well when they're prepared to. When they're given a chance, they immediately seize the day. So that's where I find hope in these experiences aimed at our youth throughout Latin America. And I look for hope in progressives of Canada, the United States, Latin America, who, of course, have present the realities that I have discussed in this presentation. And I think we need more of citizen diplomacy, academic diplomacy in our countries, and what CALACS is doing, I think is important to reach out to engage in a dialogue. This, by the way, this Peruvian writer that I just quoted, I didn't know him, but I just read an interview with him, and he said, I don't have a recipe, I don't have a strategy, I just think that in our extremely segmented and fragmented societies, we need to find ways for people to get to know, you know, their fellow citizens. And on the road to 2024, a group of us in Mexico is trying precisely to generate, you know, what we call new dialogues and new exchanges to discuss the situation of the country. I find hope in my fellow citizens.
Great, thanks so much. I'm glad to have some hope. I wanted to add that I saw that out of the many lists of deliverables coming out of the North American Leaders Summit, there was some mention of reviving the academic exchange program that some of us participated in between Canadian, US, and Mexican universities, which had died about 10, 12 years ago, but I think it was a really important program to promote that kind of academic dialogue. So that was great to see. Anyways, let's go to the questions. So there's two questions about extractivism. Sruti is asking how the extractivist industry is impacting Latin America after the pandemic and how that's contributing to instability. And Angelia is also asking if you could expand about extractivism. And I'll mention one more question about the economic situation, which is coming from Gerardo Otero. Hi, Gerardo. To what extent has the slow growth of the Mexican economy due to how the Mexican entrepreneurial class got turned off by AMLO's, is it due to AMLO's cancellation of the new airport, which we do hear a lot about? Are there other crucial events that explain the sort of domestic capital strike? But foreign investment does keep flowing in. Can't hear you.
What was the last one that you mentioned?
Oh, Gerardo is asking, why is there slow growth of the Mexican economy currently, although it has gone up a bit? Is that a kind of domestic capital strike on the part of Mexican elites because of their being upset about the cancellation of the airport? But he notes that also foreign investment does keep flowing in, including in the extractive sector.
Okay.
So extractivism and the economic sort of stagnation in Mexico.
Right. Okay, the extractivism. Well, I understand Don Kingsbury has written a book on that, but let me just discuss a couple of issues on that. Of course, by definition, the extractivism depletes resources and impoverishes people, deprives them from opportunity. So I'm just going to say that, well, yes, you find many examples in Mexico in mining, in the use of water, the use of land, and total disruption of anything that has to do with advancing towards the global development goals, the Millennium Development Goals. So let me give you an example of something that we're also trying to do to counter that. I'm on the board of Oxfam Mexico, and we tried to bring changes in legislation so that indigenous communities in the Valles Centrales of Oaxaca would have control over their own sources of water. Mexican legislation gives the federal government control, not the state authorities or the municipal authorities, but the federal government to all sources of water. So lagoons, rivers, whatever, you name it. And we introduced a legislative reform that, to our surprise, was passed. And now in the Valles Centrales, we have an example of how local communities have control over their water resources. Just a small network of communities, but that was unprecedented for them. After the visit of your Prime Minister, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who met with Canadian corporations that invest in mining, something unusual happened, which was the case that President López Obrador said to Trudeau, well, I will meet with the, the presidents or the CEOs or the members of the board of those companies, one by one, to know what they want, to know what their complaints are, and we will address them. So what's really ironic of this is that he didn't say, you have legislation in Canada on mining, we have legislation in Mexico on mining, so let's look so that all the operations are conducted under the law. No, he said, I'm meeting them personally and see how I can't carve out exceptions for each one of them. So that's part of the problem, that he's saying, I will address the issues, I will address the challenges with my personal power, with my personal discretion, to award exceptions. So that is a big problem, not only with Canadian mining companies. The largest ones are Mexican mining companies. In fact, the bid to buy Banamex, the second largest bank in Mexico, it seems that it will go to the second wealthiest man in Mexico that has created his fortune out of mining. So it is a problem. Extractivism is a problem, is a challenge, has been addressed from the grassroots in the way that I presented. Although we have very saddening experience, like the one of Berta Cáceres in Honduras, who was assassinated because she was trying to defend the source of water for the Lenca community in her region. Now, Gerardo, is the slow growth in Mexico the result of a domestic capital strike? Some may say so, but public investment is also at a record low. I mean, private investment has gone down, but public investment has gone dramatically down. And this government believes more in cash transfers than in public investment. It does not have a strategy to protect employment. It has a strategy to disburse money towards different social programs. I'm not against that, but it comes to a point in which you have to say, okay, I have stopped impoverishment, but how am I going to empower these communities, these men and women, to generate opportunities further down the road and not become dependent on the cash transfer that are dispensed by politicians to buy votes? So, my answer is, to some extent, yes. But the private sector will respond by saying the rules keep changing. And in the case of the energy reform, we have not invested because the current government has basically, destroyed the opportunities to generate clean energy. Now I'm going to talk about climate change that I did not address during my remarks. This government has bet on fossil fuels. Basically it is saying that any investment on clean energy is a boycott of Pemex and the Comisión Federal de Electricidad. So John Kerry comes 4 times. The Secretary of Energy of the Biden administration comes. We have so many visitors from Canada and the US, and each one gets the promise that we will abide by the USMCA /COSMA/TIMEC terms, but it hasn't happened. Canada and Mexico just won a panel on the auto industry, the rules of origin, against the United States. Canada and the United States are about, who knows, there is not a fixed date, to start a panel on clean energy against Mexico. And it will be, of course, if it materializes, it will be a key feature on the road to the 2024 elections, at least in Mexico, a very important feature. Was the cancellation of the New Mexico City Airport in Texcoco a factor? Did it trigger? Yes, it triggered the fall in private investment. And as you know, as you mentioned, foreign investment has continued to flow, but it is coming to a block road that is very serious, and it is the lack of clean energy. Investors are saying we need the assurance that clean energy will be available, that there will be construction of infrastructure besides the president's pet projects, and then that there will be certainty in the rules, and they will not be changed again and again after we have committed to our investments. So both the government and the opposition in Mexico have these challenges of ensuring there will be clean energy first for households in Mexico, companies and factories in Mexico, and then for investors. And it is a challenge that is far from being addressed.
Thanks so much. So there are a couple of questions related to your evocative remarks about solitude in Latin America. So maybe we can take those together, but basically, how does this central belief of solitude is, the commitment or the assumption of solitude in the behavior of elites affect their attitudes toward and their actions around climate change? And that's from Anna Clark. And then Dominique Marshall asked, was there less solitude before between Latin American countries and between them and the rest of the world? And how can we change this? Like, how could we reduce? So there's both domestic solitude and there's international solitude, as I understand it. So class relations, ethnic relations are characterized by solitude, but also relations between Latin America and the rest of the world. So can you address those? We only have like 5 minutes left or so.
Okay. I guess the case in point would now be Argentina. Argentina was, in the top 10 economies at the beginning of the 20th century. The first couple or the first 3 decades of the 20th century. A very rich country in terms of agricultural and livestock production, very high standard of living. And then we had another commodity boom, and the government of Juan Domingo Perón made sure that the workers took a slice of that generation of wealth. And then his regime turned a one-man rule like other populist regimes of that era. So Latin America was there, as a huge producer of grains, of meat, but to an increasing extent, what has happened was that Latin America did not realize that if that generation of wealth was not shared with the rest of the population in the sense of creating opportunities for the rest, then it would make their own elite become, live through this solitude within their own country. And at the international level, the neglected, abandoned sectors would try to find assistance in foreign aid, and then through remittances from abroad, Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador received in 2021 $34 billion, which is a fortune. It's much greater than the national GDP of El Salvador. But increasingly, the rich, wealthy, industrialized countries said, and even the agencies of cooperation said, how come your own elites do not care about this? So that's you're right, Laura, that I also understood that as domestic and international solitude. But let me just give another example on climate change that is seen from a different perspective. The largest baker in the world, not Mexico, not Latin America, but the world, is Bimbo, owned by the Servitje family in Mexico. And they are state-of-the-art in terms of generating their own energy, in terms of using solar panels, in terms of investing with clean energy. So they are probably the exception to the generalized view of a domestic capital strike. They have kept on investing to an enormous extent, using clean energy, and then being attacked from the government because they are using clean energy and not being greater clients of Comisión Federal de Electricidad, which is unable to generate more energy. So it's a contradiction per se. Finally, how can we change this solitude? Again, the only way out of this that I see is that not by persuasion, but by election defeat, our elites will hear the call to start a dialogue with people that they never see, they never notice, only when they are their drivers, their domestic workers, do they see Mexicans of dark skin. So that segmentation, that virtual apartheid that we have throughout Latin America with most of the elites, is of course a cultural issue, but it's also a power issue, an economic issue, a political issue, and that's the biggest challenge that we have to tackle. And I don't want to fall into the good ones and the bad ones. I'm just describing a situation in which there have been warnings that have not been heeded.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much, Carlos. I'm afraid we're going to have to stop the question and answers there because we have other activities to perform. There are some other excellent questions and comments in the Q&A, and maybe, Carlos, you could see if you could write in to answer some of them, but you don't have to. So thanks, everyone, both for your questions and Carlos for your wonderful comments. I'd like to
if you send me the questions, Laura, I can respond.
Can you open, if you click Q&A, you should be able to see it there.
Oh, good. Okay,
great.
So I will take note of this.
Thank you. Yes, so I'd like to pass the baton over to Agustin Goenaga, whose name I keep saying wrong. Sorry, Agustin, who's going to be talking about our wonderful award winners, another activity that we had to cancel from the Congress this summer. Thank you, Agustin.
Thank you, Laura, and hello, everybody. It's truly a pleasure to be here, and I think I've been given the most enjoyable task for today's events because I get to announce and then celebrate with so many CALACS friends the winners of the 4 research awards that CALACS confers every year, the winners for the 2022 edition. We grant 4 awards: the Graduate Essay Prize, the Outstanding Dissertation Prize, the Article Prize for Emerging Scholars, and the Best Book Award. So what I will do in this celebratory mode now is to tell you a little bit about the prizes, of course, announce the winners and read the citations from the different award committees in a way to pick your interest so that you also go and look for these fantastic pieces of research, most of which are, I think, now available. So for the CALACS 2022 Graduate Essay Prize, the recipient is Alison Petroziello for her paper, Birth Registration as Bordering Practice, Blocked Access to Citizenship for Migrants, Children in Latin American and the Caribbean. This CALACS Graduate Essay Prize aims to provide recognition to the most outstanding essay-length contribution by a graduate student conducting research on Latin America or the Caribbean that was presented at the annual CALACS Congress. And Petroziello's paper examines how bordering practices enacted in the process of birth registration block access to citizenship for children of people on the move across Latin America and the Caribbean. The paper is conceptually innovative and empirically impressive. It draws on a global inventory compiled by the author herself, which includes a data set of UN treaty recommendations on birth registration. This highly original and timely paper demonstrates that multiple forms of discrimination converge, placing birth registration beyond reach, even in countries with youth-only citizenship regimes. By bringing together the feminist theory of intersectionality with migration, scholarship, and bordering, Petroziello reveals the process that leads to exclusion from birth registration and the production of statelessness for thousands of children born to migrants. So the committee was highly impressed by the rich empirical data and fascinating findings of the paper. Big congratulations to Alison on this impressive achievement. Moving on to the CALACS Outstanding Dissertation Prize. This is again conferred annually to provide recognition to a young scholar who has significantly advanced our understanding of Latin America or the Caribbean. And it is with great pleasure that CALACS announced the recipient of the 22 edition of the award to Dr. Dermot O'Connor for the dissertation, The International Political Economy of Land Reform and Conflict in Colombia, 1936 to 2018, which was presented to York University and was supervised by Dr. Nicola Short. Dr. O'Connor's exceptional thesis examines a topic that is at the heart of the Colombian armed conflict: the capacity of the national elites to preserve their hegemony and impede any structural changes in the political and economic model, very much in line with Carlos's talk today and further comments. In the dissertation, Dr. O'Connor analyzes the agrarian reforms of 1936, 61, and 94, and demonstrates why these reforms did not produce equality, stability, and peace in Colombia. The dissertation presents a very sophisticated and deep analysis of agrarian transformations that uses Gramsci's concept of passive revolution and argues that the agrarian reforms only aggravated class conflict due to three factors: lack of redistribution of land belonging to the large estates, a bourgeoisie-peasant alliance in favor of capitalist expansion possible in the context of commodity booms, and the repression exercised by the reactionary elites through counterinsurgency strategies. Dr. O'Connor brilliantly demonstrates that without a redistributive agrarian reform, there would be no lasting peace in Colombia. Congratulations again to Dermot for this really valuable and remarkable contribution. The third of our prizes is devoted to an article written by an emerging scholar. And it is really intended to recognize and encourage talented junior researchers in the field of Latin American Caribbean studies. This year, the award committee agreed to grant the award to Diana Montaño for an article published at the Hispanic American Historical Review with the title Ladrones de Luz, Policing Electricity in Mexico City, 1901-1918, which I believe has now also expanded into a quite impressive monograph. Based on an impeccable methodology, Dr. Montaño uses trials and police and legal archives to tell the story of daily life and power relations in a city that is constantly and consciously modernizing. The question of access to electrical services in the early 20th century Mexico City is original and highly relevant today. Dr. Montaño introduces us not only to a forgotten piece of Mexico City's history, but also to rich documentary sources that bring out a whole panoply of voices, from large investors protected by the government to citizens with no other pretensions than to participate in the progress promised by the regime and brought within reach by technological innovation. According to the committee, the article is a fine example of expertly researched and carefully explained historical analysis. Congratulations, Diana, Dr. Montaño. And then finally, we have the Best Book Award. And this is awarded to the most outstanding book published in the previous year by a member of CALACS who researches, of course, Latin America and the Caribbean. And this time, the jury unanimously agreed to both offer the award to an exceptional book, but also to acknowledge an honorable mention to another exceptional tome. So I will be reading both of these citations. The winner of the Best Book Award is Geneviève Doré for her book, Journey to Indo-America, APRA and the Transnational Politics of Exile, Persecution, and Solidarity, 1918-1945, which was published in 2021 by Cambridge University Press. Journey to Indo-America is truly an exceptional piece of scholarly research. Through an impressive amount of original empirical evidence from archives spanning multiple countries and languages, Doré throws new light on the transnational origins of the Alianza Popular Revolucionaria Americana, APRA, in Peru. Doré convincingly shows that the APRA was not only a political movement with transnational ambitions, but that it was profoundly shaped by its founders' experiences in exile, by their engagement with global revolutionary ideologies, and by their interactions with a wide array of international actors. Maybe as a parenthesis, an exception to this Latin American solitude that has been the theme of today's talk. The nuance and novelty of the argument, the comprehensiveness of primary sources, the methodological rigor, and the elegance of the writing make this book a truly exceptional contribution to Latin American studies. And I can personally say, as a member of this award committee, that I highly recommend all of you to go look for it. Similarly, we agreed on offering an honorable mention to another book written by Dr. Adriana Pozos Barcelata under the title of Derecho y Desaparición de Personas, el cuerpo ausente como sujeto político. It is another exceptional piece of research, and I would say also activism. The book is a tour de force on the topic of disappearances in Mexico and beyond. It presents a compelling reflection of the historical processes that turned forced disappearances into both a strategy of political terror used by the state, but also as a catalyzer of new forms of political mobilization and subjectivities in Latin America. The book is also impressive in its interdisciplinary outlook, firmly rooted in political anthropology, but relevant for legal scholars, political scientists, historians, and more broadly, Latin Americanists. So congratulations to both Dr. Pozos Barcelata and Dr. Doré for these two exceptional books. And with that, my tasks for today's event are over. I give the word back to you, Laura.
Thanks so much, Agustin. I feel like I'm at the Oscar. Sorry. That was amazing, and it shows the richness and diversity of the type of research that is performed, enacted by CALACS members. So in that light, I'm passing the word over to Lucy, who's going to say something about CALACS membership.
Okay, hi, good afternoon, everyone. Just wanted to thank Carlos for a really fantastic talk. I learned so much, and like Laura, I feel depressed but optimistic based on your last comments. But what I want to do here is my name is Lucy Luchisano. I'm one of the vice presidents of CALACS. with my colleague Don Kinsbury, who's the other vice president. What I'd like to do right now is I'd like to introduce Louisa, who's our new office coordinator extraordinaire. She's fantastic. Luisa Isidro Herrera is a PhD student in the anthropology program at York University. She's a member of the Center for Research on Latin America and the Caribbean. She's on the CALACS coordinating committee and the Students Caucus Committee. Her doctoral research is at the intersections of gender, security, and violence related to the Colombian armed conflict. Her research seeks to explore how grassroots initiatives that work creatively, produce alternative forms of security, contribute to ensuring buen vivir, and generate people's creative ways to survive and live more livable lives. So Louisa has joined us, and Louisa she organizes us, she keeps us on track, and she is the person you will contact if you're having any problems with navigating with our website or and other issues related to CALACS. So what I want to turn our attention to just for a few moments, I want to say that I'm happy to say that despite the pandemic, we held strong as an association. We're small by comparison to LASA, but we're a mighty. Our financial basis comes from our membership. So our membership is really important. And the membership time period runs from January 1st to December 3rd. Your membership. We experienced a slight decline during the pandemic, but overall we have held steady. And so I encourage you to renew your membership. As our organization is largely supported by our membership fees. So I'm just going to share with you, just screen share for 1 second, our web page. So this is our web page, and to renew membership or to take out a membership, you just click on here. And even though we run in 4 languages, the English language side of the membership is the strongest part. The links for the French, Portuguese, and Spanish, those links are broken. So please go to the English side of the membership page. So what do we do? What do we do at CALACS? We do a number of things. As you just saw, we celebrate our members. We provide awards for our members, as you just saw with Augustine. So we have the awards are for Distinguished Fellow, the Best Book, the Best PhD Thesis completed in 2022, the Best Article by an Emerging Scholar, and the Best Graduate Student Essay. And we will be opening up this call for awards very soon. So if you're working on something and you'd like to submit it, please do. We also have a journal. We have the Canadian Journal of Latin America and the Caribbean Studies. Our journal is active. It is ongoing, and so you can submit your articles to the journal. As part of our organization, we also host a number of other activities. We have online events, there are roundtables, virtual forums, and ongoing activities of various research groups and new research groups that you're welcome to start. Our Student Outreach Committee has expanded the membership of graduate students. We held a number of events in 2022. We've had a number of social networking events online, but they were really fun events where we were able to grow the membership, to bring new students into the organization, and for other students to meet other students working on similar or different themes. We have a board, and our board of directors meets regularly, and our work is divided into various committees. If you would like to join us in working in committee, you're most welcome to do so. We encourage participation at the various committee levels. We have one event or a number of events that are planned for 2023, and I will turn to Dawn to speak about that.
Thank you, Lucy, and thank you, Laura, and especially thank you to Carlos. Carlos and I have been trying to get his guest talk, his keynote talk organized for it feels like almost a year now, thanks to COVID and life getting in the way. But I just wanted just now with the last few moments that I have to talk a bit about what we've got in store for 2023. This year, rather than doing an in-person gathering for the 2023 Congress, we're planning something different in CALACS. We're trying to play to the strengths of a conference, but also build in something new, more chance for collaboration, more chance for mentorship, more chance for creation. And so throughout 2023, we're going to be holding a series of 4 workshops. These are meant to be multidisciplinary in nature, and they're going to be organized around pressing themes in Latin America and the Caribbean. Well, as I said, we envision these workshops as places where you can get the kind of collaboration, creation, the in the between conversation, the mentorship, all the sort of thing you would normally get at a CALACS conference without, plugging it into one, very expensive weekend in a city far from home. So what we're thinking, and we'll be sending out more information about this in the coming weeks. So definitely pay attention. If you're not already following us on Twitter, on Instagram, make sure you do so and check your inboxes. Make sure you're getting those CALACS announcements. For even some of us on the board, they all too often go to our spam filter, guilty. So what we're looking for here is conversations. And what we're going to be doing probably next week, hopefully next week, is we'll be sending out the final announcement for our first workshop series, and that'll be coming up in March. And for these workshops, we welcome, of course, traditional conference papers, the 7 double-spaced pages with 15 minutes of talk and a little bit of Q&A after. But we also want to encourage members to really use this opportunity to host conversations, to connect with colleagues from around the Americas that you wouldn't normally be able to when you're sitting at your desk grading papers, prepping lectures, or studying for your exams. So keep your eyes open, more announcements coming down the road. And again, we're looking really to build some momentum, encourage some special issues for the Canadian Journal of Latin American and Caribbean Studies, future workshops, future conferences, and more opportunities for you to take part in CALACS. And I'll pass the word back to Lucy.
I'm going to pass it to Laura.
Or me. Thanks so much, Lucy and Don. It's a real team effort here, so it's fantastic to collaborate with all of you. So I'll just conclude by saying that if you have more questions for Carlos, he's agreed I can share his email address, which is Carlos punto Heredia, Heredia @CIDE.edu. And his Twitter handle, I believe, is @Carlos_Tampico. Right, Carlos? So follow him there. And I also wanted to mention that his lecture today was recorded and will be posted on the CALACS website. So with that, I just want to thank Carlos again, as well as Luisa and Camila behind the scenes, who've been so wonderful in organizing this event today, and all our participants. Thanks for coming, and Happy New Year.